The great viewport of the Imperial Terran cruiser Dauntless showed a slow-motion disaster. Against the velvet black of space, dotted with hard, bright stars, the angry red flashes of plasma fire, and the softer final blossoms of dying ships told the story. Captain Min-Soo Kim stood before the clear steel, his hands clasped tightly behind his back. The knuckles were white. Each silent explosion was another few hundred lives, another piece of the frontier, another chunk of the empire crumbling away. He did not flinch. He had seen too much for that. His face, in the reflected emergency glow of the bridge lights, was a map of tired lines and resigned duty. Behind him, the bridge hummed with a quiet, desperate energy. The air smelled of ozone from overloaded systems and the sharp scent of recycled sweat. Voices were low, clipped. They had been fighting this battle, this retreat, for 17 standard hours. Captain, the Valiant is gone. Her core breach took 2 Kaldir corvettes with her. The voice of Lieutenant Hannah Park was calm, but it held a thin edge of strain. Min-Soo turned from the viewport. Hannah was pinned to her tactical console, her dark eyes flickering across the holographic displays that painted the chaos in clean, terrible lines of blue and red. Blue for Imperial ships, blinking out one by one. A crushing, overwhelming wave of red for the Kaldir hegemony. Record the time and her final transmission for the archives, Min-Soo said, his own voice a low rumble. He walked through his command chair, but did not sit. Status of the evacuation planetside? A young comms officer, Jay Lee, answered from his station. His face was pale. Jeju 3 command reports? 62%. The last civilian landers are lifting from the main continent now. But the Kaldir ground batteries have taken out 3 of the evac ships in the lower atmosphere. He swallowed. No survivors. 62%. It was a number. It meant that nearly 4 out of every 10 people on the colony below would not be leaving. They would be left to the mercy of the Kaldir, who had shown none at New Osaka or Seti Prime. The math of defeat was ugly. Min-Soo gave a single sharp nod. Acknowledge. Tell them the Dauntless and the 7th Fleet will hold the line as long as there are ships to lift. The order felt like ash in his mouth. He was trading the lives of his fleet, his crew, for those fleeing civilians. It was the only calculus that mattered, but it did not make the watching any easier. On the main viewer, the Kaldir fleet advanced. Their ships were angular and aggressive, like jagged pieces of crimson crystal. They moved in swarms, their weapons firing pulses of sickly orange energy that crawled across space. Imperial shields flared brilliant blue-white under the impacts, but they were failing, one after another. The Dauntless shuddered as a near miss from a Kaldir lance rocked the portside shielding. Shields at 47%, Captain, Hannah reported. Forward batteries 3 and 4 are offline. The Courageous is moving to cover our flank, but she's venting atmosphere. Min-Soo watched the icon of the heavy cruiser Courageous on the tactical hull. It was flashing a critical damage amber. As he watched, 2 new red icons detached from the main Kaldir formation and arrowed towards it. He knew the captain of the Courageous, an old friend from the academy. He would not ask for help. He would do his duty until his ship came apart around him. Order the Courageous to fall back to the secondary rally point, Min-Soo said. He's not responding, sir, Jay said after a moment. I'm reading massive power fluctuations on his bridge. There was nothing more to do. They all watched. The 2 Kaldir ships, smaller and faster, danced around the wounded Imperial cruiser. They fired not to destroy, but to cripple, slicing away weapon mounts and engine nacelles with cruel precision. Then, a larger Kaldir vessel, a brutal wedge-shaped destroyer, moved in. A single massive beam of concentrated energy lanced out. The Courageous did not explode. It simply came apart, its hull splitting into two glowing, molten pieces that began a slow, tragic tumble into the gravity well of Jeju-3. A deep silence settled on the bridge of the Dauntless. The loss of his ship was not just a loss of metal and firepower. It was a community, a history, 1,000 individual stories ended in an instant. "The Kaldir command ship is pushing forward," Hana said, breaking the quiet. Her fingers flew over her console, pulling up an enhanced image. The vessel was massive, a spiked fortress trailing a constellation of smaller attack craft. They're concentrating fire on the fleet's center. Admiral Ru is ordering all remaining ships to tighten formation. This is the final stand, sir." Minsu finally sat in his command chair. It felt like settling into a tomb. He looked around his bridge. At Hana, whose brilliant mind was now focused solely on delaying the inevitable. At Jay, trying to hold his composure as he listened to the frantic dying signals from other ships. At the others, Ensign Choi at navigation, her hands steady on the controls. Chief Engineer B.O. Ram on the comlink from below decks, his voice a constant, gruff report of failing systems. They were all so young. Except for him. He was the old man, the one who had to see them through to the end. "Very well," Minsu said. His voice carried across the quiet bridge. "All hands, battle stations. Link our remaining shield power with the Resolute and the Steadfast. Target the lead Kaldir destroyer in their forward wedge. We may not break their line, but we will make it expensive." A chorus of "Aye, Captain" echoed back, thin but determined. The Dauntless turned, her engines groaning in protest. On the viewer, the wall of red icons grew larger, closer. The last of the Imperial blue icons gathered into a tight, sad knot against them. It was a picture from a history book, Minsu thought. The last stand of a doomed regiment. The final charge of a lost cause. He thought of Jeju-3, of the green forests and wide oceans he'd seen in the briefing materials. He thought of the people crammed into the holds of the fleeing freighters, looking back at the flashes of light in their sky, not knowing which flash was a protector dying. He thought of his own homeworld, far behind the lines, still believing in the invincibility of the Empire. A tremendous impact shook the Dauntless, throwing several crew to the deck. Alarms shrieked. "Direct hit on Deck 7. Sections 7 through 10 are open to vacuum. Shield generators are failing." Hana's report was loud now, fighting against the noise. "Seal the blast doors. Divert all power to forward shields and weapons," Minsu ordered. His grip on the armrests iron tight. The main viewer flickered, then stabilized, showing a close-up of the Kaldir command ship. It was launching a new wave of fighters, a cloud of deadly gnats. They were close enough now to see the intricate, cruel patterns carved into their hulls. This was it. The maw of the Empire was being kicked in, and they were the teeth about to be shattered. Minsu prepared to give the order to fire their last desperate volley. He took a slow breath, his eyes meeting Hana's for a brief second. She gave him a small, grim nod. They were ready. It was then, at the very edge of annihilation, that Hana's console emitted a different sound, not an alarm, but a soft, persistent chime of something her sensors could not classify. Her eyes darted to a secondary screen, to a patch of empty space near the dead moon's Lagrange point 2. A patch of space that was now writhing with an energy signature that matched nothing in the Imperial database. Nothing in the Kaldir profiles either. "Captain," she said, her voice sharp with confusion, cutting through the roar of battle. "I'm reading a spatial distortion. Bearing 027, Mark 15. Extreme range. It's not one of theirs." The chime from Hana's console was a tiny, insane sound against the roar of the Dauntless dying. For a second, she thought it was a sensor ghost, a final glitch before the Kaldir plasma burned through the hull. But the signature was too clean, too deliberate. Her eyes, scratchy with exhaustion, locked onto the flickering data. "Repeat, Lieutenant." Captain Min-Soo Kim's voice was a gravelly command over the din of another near-miss. The ship shuddered violently. "Anomalous contact, Captain. Bearing 027, Mark 15. Extreme range. It's transitioning into real space. But the energy profile is all wrong." Hana's fingers flew, trying to clean up the signal. The main battle was momentarily forgotten. This was a new variable. In their current situation, a new variable was either a miracle or a horrifying new threat. On the main viewer, the Kaldir swarm continued its advance, oblivious. The Imperial fleet's final defensive volley lanced out, scoring a few hits on the lead destroyer, but doing little to slow the tide. Min-Soo glanced at the tactical holo. The new contact was just a faint, blinking purple icon, far from the main engagement. "A ghost identification?" Min-Soo asked, his attention split between the immediate death approaching and this new puzzle. "Nothing matches, sir. Not Imperial, not Kaldir, not any known minor faction signature. It's reading as a massive spatial fold, but without the gamma burst or neutrino bloom. It's clean." Hana shook her head, as if the motion could make the data make sense. "It's like space itself is just bending and then snapping back into place." Jay Lee, at comms, looked up. "No transponder codes. No signals on any frequency. It's silent." "Keep a marker on it," Min-Soo ordered, turning his full attention back to the crimson wave. "It's probably some Kaldir stealth probe. We have more immediate problems. All batteries, fire at will on the closest attackers." The Dauntless groaned as her remaining plasma cannons unleashed their fury. A Kaldir fighter dissolved into a brief, satisfying fireball, but 3 more took its place. On the tactical holo, the purple icon stopped blinking. It stabilized. It was now a solid, persistent mark. And it began to move. "Captain, the contact is moving," Hana announced, her confusion deepening. "But it's not on a drive plume. I'm reading no thermal signature, no ion trail, nothing." "How is it moving, then?" Min-Soo snapped, his patience worn thin by the impossible. "It's not traveling. It's just there." Hana zoomed the sensor display on her screen. "Look." She put the visual on a secondary monitor. The bridge crew who could spare a glance saw it. A ship. It was matte black, so dark it seemed to drink the light from the stars around it. It had a smooth, almost organic shape, like a river stone worn flat with no sharp edges. No visible windows, no weapon ports, no engine nozzles. It was simply a silhouette, a cutout shape of nothingness against the cosmos dot, then it vanished. "Contact lost," Hana said, her head jerking up from her screen, but it reappeared. Not along a line of travel, but in a new position several thousand kilometers away, directly between the shattered flank of the Imperial 7th Fleet and the advancing spearhead of the Kaldir formation. It had not moved. It had simply ceased to be in one place and begun to be in another. There was no blur, no streak of light. One moment it was at the edge of the sensor range. The next it was in the middle of the battlefield. A profound silence, deeper than the sounds of battle, gripped the bridge of the Dauntless. What in the name of soul? Ensign Choi whispered from navigation. The Kaldir seemed to notice. A smaller corvette on the edge of their formation broke off and turned its nose toward the black ship. It fired a probing lance of orange plasma. The beam crossed the space where the ship was and hit nothing. The black ship had blinked again, now appearing a few hundred kilometers to the corvette's port side. It was closer to the Kaldir ship now. The corvette fired again, rapid pulses this time. Each time, the black ship was gone before the energy bolt arrived, reappearing in a different, seemingly random spot, but always a little closer. It was a dance, a terrifying, silent dance where one partner moved in normal space and the other simply teleported in tiny, instantaneous jumps. It's toying with it, Hannah breathed, her analytical mind drawing and failing to process the physics. Its movements are predictive. It knows where the shots will be before they're fired. The Kaldir corvette, now clearly agitated, launched a spread of seeking missiles. They spiraled out, their drives bright. The black ship did not evade. It waited. As the missiles closed to terminal range, it vanished once more. The missiles, suddenly without a target, spiraled harmlessly past into empty space. The black ship reappeared so close to the corvette that on the visual display, they almost seemed to touch. Then something happened. There was no flash, no explosion. One moment the Kaldir corvette was intact, its engines glowing. The next, its entire midsection seemed to crumple. It was as if an invisible giant fist had clenched around it. The hull metal screeched and folded in on itself silently in the vacuum. Then, a series of internal detonations tore the ship apart from the inside. It became a brief, expanding cloud of debris. The black ship was already gone. It had appeared next to a Kaldir frigate. On the Dauntless Bridge, no one spoke. They watched, stunned, as the frigate tried to turn, to bring its heavier guns to bear. The black ship blinked behind it. A section of the frigate's engine array simply sheared off, as if sliced by a monofilament wire the size of a continent. The frigate, mortally wounded, began to drift, its power flickering out. "It's not using weapons," Minsu said, his voice hushed with awe and dread. "It's just appearing, and space around it is reacting." The main Kaldir fleet had now fully taken notice. The easy predatory advance halted. The swarm churned, ships changing course to face this new, incomprehensible threat. The massive command ship began to reorient itself, its spiked hull turning like a slow, angry beast. The black ship took no apparent notice of the regrouping enemy. It continued its silent, phantom dance. It would appear, hang in the void for a second, and then vanish only to reappear at the perfect point to cripple another vessel. A destroyer's main weapon battery twisted and melted for no visible reason. A carrier's launch bay doors were fused shut by a sudden, intense gravitational lensing effect that warped the metal like taffy. Hana was frantically recording everything, her scientist's mind screaming at the violations of every known law of motion and combat. The energy readings, localized space-time distortions. It's creating microscopic gravitational singularities and then collapsing them. It's using physics as a weapon. Jay Lee finally found his voice. It was a whisper, but in the dead silence of the bridge, it sounded like a shout. He wasn't speaking into his coms. He was just stating a fact, a terrible, wonderful fact that was now undeniable. He said what they were all thinking. "Captain, that's no ship we know." Minsu stared at the viewer, at the sleek, impossible black shape that was now holding the entire Kaldir advance at bay by itself. It moved with a grace that was beyond technology. It was like watching a shadow detached from its owner, moving to its own rules. "No," Minsu agreed quietly, his eyes wide. "It's moving like a phantom." And as if hearing him, the phantom ship, having sowed chaos through the Kaldir vanguard, stopped its blinking dance. It settled into a position directly between the broken Imperial fleet and the heart of the hegemony's armada. It did not attack. It simply waited, a silent, matte black challenge hanging in the airless dark. The message was clear. The line would be held here. By it? The silence on the bridge of the Dauntless was a physical thing, thick and heavy. It was the silence of shock, of a fundamental breaking of reality. The only sounds were the low hum of life support and the faint, persistent beep from Hannah's console tracking the impossible ship. On the main viewer, The tableau was frozen. The broken, bleeding formation of imperial blue icons. The vast, swirling storm of Kaldir red. And between them, a single, steady purple marker that defied all their understanding. The Kaldir command ship. A monstrous spike of crimson metal, dubbed the World Reaver by Imperial intelligence, finished its slow turn. It was a city killer, a fleet carrier, and a battleship fused into one terrifying shape. It had clearly seen enough of its vanguard being dismantled by the Silent Phantom. A new priority target was identified. Captain, the Hegemony flagship is powering its primary beam weapon, Hana reported, her voice tense. Data scrolled on her screen. Energy signature is off the scale. It's a planet cracker. They're targeting the black ship. Minsu leaned forward in his command chair. Can we warn it? Hail it on all frequencies. Anything. Jay Lee's hands danced over his panel. Trying, sir. All bands full power. No response. It's just listening to nothing. On the screen, the forward spines of the World Reaver began to glow with a malevolent, building orange light. It gathered, coalescing into a single point of star-hot fury. The weapon discharged, a beam of pure, annihilating energy, thick as a skyscraper, lanced across the void. It was meant to vaporize continents. It cut through the space where the black ship hovered and hit nothing. The black ship was simply not there when the beam arrived. It had winked out of existence a microsecond before impact and reappeared 200 kilometers to the left, its position unchanged relative to the Kaldir fleet. It hadn't even seemed to move. It was as if reality had flickered, corrected a mistake, and put the ship where it had always meant to be. A collective gasp went through the Dauntless. Bridged out the World Reaver. Undeterred, or perhaps now enraged, fired again. And again. And again. Each titanic blast, enough to cripple a moon, tore through empty space. The black ship performed its silent, infuriating dance. It blinked ahead, behind, above, below the beams. It was never where the Kaldir predicted. It was always a step into the future, a ghost in the machine of causality itself. It's not evading, Hana whispered, her eyes glued to her sensor analysis. She was running predictive algorithms, trying to find a pattern. It's preempting. My software? It's showing that the black ship's jumps occur 0.02 seconds before the Kaldir even finished the command to fire. It's reading their intent. They're targeting computers. Their neural commands to the gunners. It's seeing the future of their attack and choosing not to be there. The implications were staggering. This wasn't just better shields or faster engines. This was a level of awareness, of space-time manipulation. That was godlike. Having demonstrated its invulnerability, the black ship stopped playing defense. It initiated a new pattern. It began to blink not randomly, but with a terrible, surgical purpose. It appeared directly in the path of a Kaldir missile salvo launched at a drifting Imperial cruiser. The Resolute, the missiles, moments from impact, simply vanished. Not destroyed. They ceased to exist in the local spacetime. The black ship vanished from in front of the Resolute and reappeared nestled against the belly of the Kaldir missile frigate that had launched them. For a long second, nothing happened. The frigate's point defense guns swiveled, firing frantically. The shots passed through empty space where the ship had been, now harming their own vessel. Then the frigate's hull rippled. It was a horrifying sight. The solid metal warped like liquid, flowing inwards as if a black hole the size of a grapefruit had formed inside its engineering deck. The ship crumpled in on itself with a silent, violent spasm before its reactor lost containment, and it bloomed into a brief, secondary fireball. The black ship was already gone. It began to hunt. It would appear at the extreme edge of a Kaldir destroyer's shield bubble. The shields, designed to deflect energy and matter, did nothing. Space itself twisted. The destroyer's navigational spine, a long structural keel, snapped with a force that bent the entire ship into a V shape. It went dark and dead, spinning away. It blinked into the center of a squadron of Kaldir fighters. The fighters did not explode. Their systems just died. Every piece of electronics, every engine, every life support unit shut off at once, as if a switch had been thrown on the universe itself. They became inert metal coffins, drifting. Hana watched, her stomach tight. It's not trying to cause maximum destruction. It's aiming for system kills. Engineering, weapons, propulsion. It's efficient. Panic, visible even from across the vast distance, began to infect the Kaldir formation. Their tight, predatory swarms broke apart. Ships began to turn, not in a coordinated maneuver, but in a desperate scramble to get away from the phantom that could be anywhere, could do anything. The silent, precise carnage was more terrifying than any loud bombardment. The Kaldir command network is flooding with signals, Jay reported, his voice incredulous. It's chaos. They're screaming about a void demon. They're ordering a general retreat. On the tactical hala, the solid wall of red began to fragment. Icons representing cruisers and carriers turned green for retreat, pulling back towards the system's mass shadow, the necessary prelude to a faster-than-light jump. The smaller ships milled in confusion, some trying to cover the larger ones, others simply fleeing. The black ship did not pursue. Having shattered the spearhead of the attack and broken the enemy's will, it ceased its offensive. It made one final jump, placing itself once more directly between the retreating Kaldir and the huddled Imperial survivors. A silent, immovable sentinel. Then it did something new. It stopped blinking. It held its position, hanging in the void. Its matte black surface remained inert, revealing nothing. For the first time in half an hour, the guns were silent. The only things moving were the Kaldir, fleeing in disarray, and the expanding debris fields of their lost ships. The Imperial 7th Fleet, what was left of it, simply existed, too broken and stunned to even comprehend their salvation. Minsu finally let out a breath he felt he'd been holding for an hour. He looked around his bridge. His crew were pale, wide-eyed, some near tears from the sheer psychological whiplash. They had prepared for a noble death. They had not prepared for a miracle that felt like an unsettling dream. "Damage report?" Minsu said, his voice rough. The ordinary command felt bizarre. As reports began to filter in hull breaches. Casualties, failing systems. Minsu's eyes remained fixed on the viewer, on the black ship. "Who are you?" he murmured, not expecting an answer. And then Jay Lee's console chimed a soft, polite sound. He looked down, his brow furrowed. "Captain, we're receiving a directed transmission. Tight beam. It's for us." From the black ship. Every head turned. On speaker, Minsu ordered. Jay worked his controls, then nodded. There was no voice, no image. Just lines of text appearing on Jay's screen and mirrored onto the main viewer. The font was clean, simple, and in perfect, archaic Imperial standard. It read, **** priority communication. Source, Vigil.2. It's Dauntless Commanding Officer. From The Long Watch. Message, you are not alone. Cease combat operations. Stand by for navigational data. Re-establish connection. Protocol Morning Star. Coordinates attached. Acknowledge receipt. ***. The bridge was silent again. But now the silence was of a different kind. It was the silence of a door, long thought sealed and forgotten. Creaking open onto a light no one had seen for centuries. Hana was the first to speak. Her voice filled with the awe of an archaeologist finding a living city. The Long Watch. Captain, that's a pre-Empire designation. From the generation ship era. That's human. Minsu stared at the words on the screen. You are not alone. They were not from some alien savior. They were from a lost child of humanity. Come home. He looked from the message to the black phantom ship, now a symbol not of alien mystery, but of human potential grown in directions he could not even fathom. Acknowledge the message, Jay, Minsu said quietly. Then, to the helmsman, plot the attached coordinates. Order the fleet? What's left of it? To follow. We're going to see what morning looks like. The silence that followed the message was not peaceful. It was the tense, humming quiet of a world turned upside down. On the bridge of the Dauntless, every crew member moved with a strange, careful energy, as if a loud noise might break the fragile miracle that had saved them. The main viewer still showed the retreating Kaldir fleet, their angry red icons shrinking towards the system's edge, a broken swarm fleeing from a single silent predator. And in the foreground, the black ship Dot, it had not moved again. It hung there, a matte black sentinel, giving no further instruction. The coordinates it had sent were not to a planet or a station within the Jeju system. They were to a point in deep interstellar space, several light hours away, a place of nothing. Coordinates verified and locked, Captain, Ensign Choi said from navigation. Her hands were steady, but her eyes kept flicking to the viewer. It's empty space. No gravity wells, no navigational markers. Just a set of galactic coordinates. A rendezvous point, Minsu said, more to himself than anyone. He sat in his command chair, feeling its familiar contours. They felt different now. The chair belonged to a captain of the Terran Empire, a crumbling power whose best ships had just been saved by a ghost from its own past. Plot the course. Minimal power. We're in no shape for speed. He turned to Jay at communications. Send the coordinates to every Imperial ship that can still move. Order them to follow at their best possible speed. And send a general hail to the black ship. Simple text. Message acknowledged. Dauntless and surviving fleet, en route to provided coordinates. Request identification. Jay sent the message. They all watched, waiting. For a full minute, there was nothing. Then, Jay's console lit up with another simple text reply. Asterisk, asterisk, acknowledged. Identification. Vigil Fleet. Escort protocol active. Proceed. Asterisk, asterisk, no name. No personal greeting. Just Vigil Fleet. Vigil. Hana repeated softly from her station. She had pulled up historical archives on her secondary screen. It's there. Faint references. The Vigil was one of the last great generation ships. Launched over 300 years ago, just before the Empire consolidated. Its mission was long-range exploration and perpetual watch. It was presumed lost to a warp core failure a century into its journey. Looks like their core failure report was a little exaggerated, Minsu said dryly. He felt a strange mix of profound relief and deep unease. They were alive, but they were now following a power that made the Empire's technology look like stone tools. The journey took hours. The Dauntless, with her battered hull and struggling engines, led a sad procession of wounded ships. 8 capital ships had survived from the 7th Fleet, along with a handful of smaller frigates and 1 limping destroyer. They moved through the silent dark, a funeral march for their own defeat that had somehow not ended in a grave dot, and always the black ship was with them. It did not travel beside them. It would vanish from their rear scatters, and a few minutes later appear on long-range sensors far ahead, holding position at the next navigation point, like a shepherd waiting for slow sheep. It moved not by traveling the space between points, but by existing only at the points that mattered. It was deeply unsettling. Hana spent the entire trip analyzing the sensor data from the battle. The energy signatures. Captain, they're not using reaction drives. They're not even using warp fields in a way we understand. She called up a complex graph on her screen. They create a localized fold in spacetime, a kink, and then they smooth it out with themselves on the other side of the kink. They're not moving through space. They're moving space itself around them. It's like crumpling a piece of paper to bring 2 points together, but they do it without actually crumpling the paper. They just convince 2 points that they're the same point for an instant. Min-Su listened. It was like listening to a child explain magic. The words were familiar, but the meaning was beyond him. Can we do it? Could we ever? Hannah looked at him, her face pale in the screen's glow. I don't think so, sir. Not for centuries, if ever. It's not an engineering problem. It's a philosophical one. They understand reality on a level we don't. To them, our ships must look like we're rowing a wooden boat across an ocean. As they neared the coordinates, long-range sensors finally began to pick up something. Not a ship, not a planet. A massive irregular shape blotting out the stars. Contact at the rendezvous point, Hannah announced, her voice hushed. It's big. No energy readings. It's cold dark. On the main viewer, the object resolved as they drew closer. It was a citadel, but not one of the gleaming, spire-covered imperial star fortresses. This was ancient, its architecture blocky and functional, made of a dark, non-reflective alloy that had not seen a paintbrush in centuries. It was pocked with the micrometeorite scars of eons. Vast docking arms, empty and silent, extended from a central cylindrical core. It looked dead. A tomb. It's a generation ship terminal, Min-Su breathed. A seed. From the early Exodus. As the wounded Imperial fleet drifted to a halt before the colossal, silent structure, the black ship finally rejoined them. It blinked into existence, not far from the dauntless SBO, closer than it had ever been. In the light of the distant sun, they could see its surface was not perfectly smooth. It had a texture like layered scales or feathers, but it absorbed the light so completely it was hard to tell. Then, a section of the ancient citadel's side began to glow with a soft, blue-white light. A docking bay door, hundreds of meters tall, slid open silently, revealing a well-lit interior. An invitation. They want us to go in, Ensign Choi said. Min-Su hesitated. This was it. The unknown. The Empire's rules, its protocols, meant nothing here. He was about to lead his people into the womb of a history they had forgotten. Take us in, Ensign. Slow and careful. Order the rest of the fleet to hold position here. We'll be the greeting party. The Dauntless, with her scars and her pain, turned and limped towards the bright opening. As they crossed the threshold, they saw the scale of the dock. It could have held a dozen ships their size. The interior was pristine, lit by panels set into walls that curved away into shadows. And there, centered in the bay, was the black ship. It sat on the deck, resting on no visible landing gear, as if it had been gently set down by a giant's hand. A seam appeared along its side, and a ramp extended, touching the deck without a sound. A figure walked down the ramp. It was human. A woman. She wore a form-fitting suit of the same matte black material as her ship, but without the scaled texture. It was simple, with no insignia or rank. She was of average height, her black hair cut short and practical. Her face was calm, unreadable, but her eyes were sharp, taking in the battered Dauntless as it settled onto its landing struts with a groan of tired metal. Min-Su stood. Lieutenant Park, you're with me. Jay, you have the bridge. He headed for the exit. Hana falling in step beside him, her data pad clutched tightly. The air in the Citadel dock was cool and carried a faint, clean scent, like ozone after a rain. It felt ancient. Minsu and Hana walked down their own ship's ramp, their boots echoing in the vast space. They stopped a few meters from the woman from the black ship. For a moment, they just looked at each other, separated by centuries of divergent history. Minsu spoke first, his voice formal. "I am Captain Minsu Kim of the Imperial Terran ship Dauntless. We thank you for your intervention." The woman nodded slightly. "Captain Kim, I am Commander Yuna of the Visual Fleet." Her voice was clear, her accent strange, an archaic form of Imperial standard that sounded almost musical. "The thanks are not necessary. We kept our promise." "Your promise?" Hana asked, unable to contain her scientist's curiosity. Yuna's eyes shifted to her. "The promise of the Long Watch. To monitor. To preserve. To intervene only when the survival of the cradle species was at stake from an external threat. Not from your own wars. Not from your own failures. But from a tide meant to erase you." She looked back at Minsu. "The Kaldir hegemony is such a tide. Your empire's fleets retreat. But humanity does not." Minsu absorbed the words. "Cradle species. They were children to these people. Where have you been? All this time?" "Out there," Yuna said, gesturing vaguely upward towards the stars beyond the citadel roof. "Learning, growing, waiting. We have much to share, Captain. But first, we must see to your wounded." She looked past him at the scarred hull of the Dauntless. "Your way of fighting. It is very loud and very fragile. A new way is required." Commander Yuna's words hung in the cool, ancient air of the docking bay. A new way is required. They were not a criticism, but a simple statement of fact, like observing that a knife was dull. Captain Minsu Kim felt the weight of his own world on his shoulders. The dying empire, the lost ships, the billions still under threat. He looked from Yuna's calm, unreadable face to the impossible black vessel behind her, then back to the battered, heroic bulk of the Dauntless. His home, a relic already. "Our wounded," Minsu began, his voice finding its strength again. "We have over 200 critical cases in our med bay alone. The other ships." Yuna gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She tapped a device on her wrist, a smooth band with no visible buttons. "Medical teams are deploying. They will come to your ships. Please instruct your crews to allow them access." Even as she spoke, from openings in the far walls of the vast dock, small, streamlined craft glided out. They were shaped like teardrops and made of the same light-absorbing material, but they glowed with a soft internal amber light. They moved with a whisper, not a roar. They approached the damaged Imperial ships like cautious birds. On the Dauntless Bridge, Jay Lee's console chimed. "Captain, we're receiving direct medical protocols. They're asking for our casualty lists and bioscan data. They say they can handle everything." He sounded uncertain. "Give them full access, Jay," Minsu said, watching one of the teardrop craft settle gently beside a gaping hull breach on the Dauntless S-flank. "We're past secrets." Hannah Park, standing beside him, couldn't take her eyes off Yuna, off the ship, off the Citadel. "Your technology. It manipulates local spacetime. The tactical applications. What we saw are a last resort," Yuna finished for her. Her tone was not unkind, but firm. "A tool for preservation, not conquest. The principle is harmony, not force. We do not break the laws of physics. We converse with them. Your science uses energy to push against the universe. Ours asks the universe to move aside." She gestured for them to follow her. "Come, your crew will be cared for. You need to understand." She led them away from the ships, through a tall archway and into the body of the Citadel. The corridors were wide, clean, and lit by the same soft panel lighting. The air remained fresh. They saw no one else. The place felt less like a busy station and more like a temple that had been asleep. They entered a circular chamber with a large, clear viewport looking out onto space. From here, they could see the remains of the Seventh Fleet, huddled like wounded animals, and the gentle, glowing medical craft moving among them. Beyond, the stars were sharp and cold. "This is a watch citadel," Una said, standing by the viewport. "One of many left in the dark between stars. A haven, a library, a waypoint. We have watched the Empire grow, stagnate, and now begin to fracture. We did not intervene in your civil wars, your corruptions, your slow decline. That was your path to walk. But the Khaldir, they are a galactic scourge. They do not conquer. They consume. They would have eaten your worlds, your people, and moved on. That is not a fate we could allow for the cradle." "The cradle," Minsu repeated. "You keep saying that, as if we're infants." Una finally looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something like empathy in her eyes. "Not infants, but focused on a different struggle. You fought for resources, for territory, for political power within the limited box of known space and known physics. Your entire history has been a fight over the arrangement of pieces on a board. We stepped outside the box. We looked at the board itself, the wood it is made from, the hands that carved it." Hannah stepped forward, her curiosity burning through her awe. "The ship that saved us. How many are there? Is the Vigil still out there?" A faint smile touched Una's lips. The Vigil generation ship completed its mission long ago. Its people settled a dozen worlds you have not yet mapped. We are their descendants. The Vigil fleet is small. We are not an empire. We are a network. A promise kept across generations. The ship you saw is one of our sentinels. There are others like me, watching other borders, other nascent species facing their own Khaldir. The scale of it dawned on Minsu. This wasn't just humanity's secret savior. This was a philosophical stance on a galactic scale. A silent, patient guardianship. "What happens now?" Minsu asked, the practical captain reasserting himself. "The Khaldir are retreating from Jesu 3, but they'll be back. With more. They've seen your power, but they are relentless. And the Empire is broken. It cannot hold. Now," Una said, turning from the viewport, "we fulfill the second part of the promise. Preservation through knowledge." She gestured, and the wall opposite the viewport shimmered to life, showing complex schematics, star maps that looked ancient, and streams of data in that same clean, archaic script. Protocol Morning Star is a technology and knowledge transfer protocol established by the original Vigil colonists. It was to be triggered only in a moment of existential crisis. Hannah's breath caught. "You're going to give it to us? Your understanding?" "Not all of it. That would be like giving a fusion reactor to someone who has just discovered fire. It would destroy you. But we can give you the next step. Shield technology that bends energy around your ships instead of absorbing it. Drive systems that are 10 times more efficient. Medical science that can regenerate limbs and cure the cellular decay you call aging." She paused. "And we can show you the true nature of the Khaldir threat. Their origin points. Their weaknesses. They are not invincible. They are simply ahead of you on the path you are walking. We offer a different path." Minsu felt a surge of something he had not felt since the first Khaldir warhead had struck the Dauntless S-shield. Hope. But it was a terrifying hope. It meant the end of the empire he knew. Its rigid hierarchies, its proud but obsolete fleets, its entire way of being would be swept away by this tide of new knowledge. The empire's fleets would retreat, not just from battle, but from history itself. And the cost? Min-Su asked, his voice low. There is always a cost. Yuna's gaze was steady. The cost is your isolation. You join the Watch. You become part of the network. You help us protect others when you are able. You turn your eyes outward, not just inward. The Empire may fall. It probably will. But humanity will not. It will evolve. She walked over to a console and entered a command. The viewport's view shifted, zooming out. It showed a galactic map. The Terran Empire was a small, glowing cluster near one spiral arm. The Kaldir hegemony was a spreading red stain, and scattered throughout the vast black like tiny, steady blue embers or points of light. Dozens of them. The Vigil Network, Yuna said. We are not alone. And now, neither are you. Min-Su looked at Hana. Her eyes were wide, reflecting the map of a galaxy suddenly grown much larger and fuller of possibilities. He looked back at Yuna, then out the viewport at his wounded ship, his wounded fleet. They had been prepared to be the last noble entry in a story of defeat. Instead, they were to be the first. Confused sentence in a new story. He straightened his worn uniform jacket. He was Captain Min-Su Kim of the Imperial Terran ship Dauntless. Perhaps for not much longer. But he was a human. And for the first time in a long time, it felt like enough. Show us, he said to Commander Yuna. Show us the morning.